Hey friends, welcome back to the channel. And if you're new here, then welcome. My name is Danielle, and I chat all about holistic and clutter-free spaces. If that's something you're into, be sure to click subscribe and turn on those notifications. I release new videos every Tuesday. So over the years, I have sifted through many comments and had many conversations that have led me to believe that for many people, minimalism isn't what you think it is. So today I'm going to be addressing some pretty common ways that I feel like people are misconstruing the idea of minimalism and maybe misunderstanding or are misinformed about what minimalism actually is and what it looks like in application. I'm going to pull up some of my verbatims over here and we're just going to talk about it. Minimalists want everything to be bland and colorless. Fair point. If you look at my background, I definitely have quite a bit of gray. Honestly, it's a personal preference. I know a lot of people who practice living a clutter-free lifestyle, even all the way down to being an extreme minimalist lifestyle, I would say, that love splashes of color in their home. And there are areas that you can't see in the shot right now where I have more color than others. Like my couch is a really deep dark blue. It's not gray or white or black. What you're seeing here, though, is a difference of minimalist design and style versus minimalism as a clutter-free practicing lifestyle, which are two different things. And it's true that a lot of times you can see those merged into one, especially when you're looking at influencers who like to present a minimalist style because that's what they're into and that attracts the audience that they're looking to speak to, while maybe simultaneously practicing a minimalist lifestyle where they're being intentional and aware about the belongings that they're bringing in and maybe even prioritizing things like space and time and energy and freedom over an accumulation of things. It really is more of an excess related issue than it is a color related issue or a style related issue. Two different things. They are both things. Minimalism is also a style. It is also a type of art and architecture and even music. But in the sense that I talk about here on the channel, and most people who talk about minimalism speak on their channels, they're talking about minimalism as a clutter-free, no excess type of lifestyle. People ask me all the time what the color of these walls is. They are Heath Gray by Behr. They have a really nice blend of kind of blues while also bringing in the warmer tones. And to me, it feels really soothing. I enjoy this type of atmosphere. But somebody who doesn't, somebody who wanted to have red walls, could very well also be a minimalist. It's funny because the next one is that art on your wall is not essential. This is something that I've heard people say, I think kind of like tongue in cheek sometimes, like, oh, well, you have this in there. That's not really essential. I'm sure if you're a minimalist, you could do without that. And that brings me to my next point, which is that minimalism is not necessarily the same as essentialism. There is some overlap there. A lot of minimalists, especially minimalists who have platforms, will talk about essentialism and the overlap there. And most people reside on some end of the spectrum or some point of the spectrum because you can be an essentialist type of minimalist. And especially since the book Essentialism by Greg McGowan came out and it was really popular, more people talked about essentialism there. But essentialism can be used in a variety of different ways. Like it doesn't necessarily only apply to your belongings, whereas minimalism is more specifically and directly related to your belongings. And in fact, the book Essentialism was a little more focused on things like projects and tasks and what you're fitting into your day than it was so much focused on your belongings. All of that aside, as I said, there is a spectrum of people practicing minimalism. Some people choose to be very ascetic minimalists who are, living with the backpack on their back and only their necessities and traveling around the world, right? These nomad minimalists, that's definitely a thing. And a lot of them will share their journeys. And while it's a very captivating lifestyle, there are also other people like myself where I have 3 children and a 2-bedroom condo over here, and we're practicing living with less clutter and just trying to keep things to the bare minimum, but not necessarily only the essentials, because there's a lot of stuff that we could live without. Like we don't have to have a set of silverware. We could technically probably use our hands, right? We could technically just have 1 fork per person. We don't have that. So for me, my motto when it comes to minimalism and kind of where I stand is that it's been a practice of awareness and intention regarding my belongings, my space, and my time. I also prefer what I call a more holistic approach to minimalism. I believe that our spaces shouldn't just be barren, empty, only essential places. I think that they should provide more to us. I'm really big into feeling like your space should give you the energy and the support that you need for any given daily function. And a lot of times that might mean that it's essential for your space to have inspiring artwork or, a really cozy blanket or a really comfortable chair, even if it's not essential in an area that's going to help you to perform better. All right. I think minimalists basically have OCD. This has been worded a variety of different ways to me, but it's basically a comparison of minimalism to perfectionism or to being like hyper clean, hyper focused, and obsessed with your space and not wanting anything to be out of order. I wrote a whole article on this years ago called Minimalism versus Perfectionism. Are they the same? Spoiler, they're not. Even in the article, I talk about how detrimental perfectionism can be, depending on the extreme and the level that you suffer from perfectionism. But perfectionism can ruin relationships. It can delay projects. It leads to dissatisfaction and higher stress levels. Whereas the whole goal of minimalism is really the opposite of all those things. It's to prioritize your relationships and make more time for them, to make it to where you can focus better in your spaces and be more effective and productive at work, and to hopefully lower your stress levels and your cortisol levels and give you more peace and rest in your space. So really the effects of both of these things, OCD, perfectionism, minimalism, are opposites. At least they should be opposites. I hear you're a minimalist. You should come organize my space. I hear that a lot, usually from friends or family members who are trying to be nice and tell me that they're not that way. But honestly, I don't care what any of my friends or family's homes look like. Obviously, I want them to be happy and have space and time, but I'm not trying to convert anybody. And minimalism and organizing are really two different things. One is about living with less stuff and less clutter, less excess, which you could very well do and still be a very disorganized person. The other is about organizing the stuff that you do have. And actually, they tend to be the opposites from what I've seen. If you look at organization feeds on Instagram or on Pinterest, there will be a lot of stuff, like multiples and duplicates of stuff that's all neatly organized and rowed and put into different shapes and patterns. And it can look really appealing. It's great for just visual feeds. In application, the stuff generally doesn't stay there and it ends up becoming an excess issue, a clutter issue inside of the space, because they're two very different things. Easy for you to be a minimalist since you're so privileged. Okay. I made a whole video actually on is minimalism for the rich or the poor, where I share my whole spiel about that. I've seen both. I've seen people who are really wealthy and still choose to be minimalist. I've seen people who are really poor and were glad that minimalism was trending because it made the stuff that they have seem like it was the right amount of stuff anyway. And when I first started practicing minimalism, I was on the poor side for sure. I even at times in my life was looking at the rice and beans diet side of things in my life. And so when people say that you're so privileged and that's why it's easy for you to be a minimalist, and I'm not saying that there are not ways that I am privileged. If compared to me to other people, there are some that I'm more privileged than, some that I'm less privileged than. It's amazing that I'm able to sit here and record these videos, and that's part of my job, that I get to own my own business, that I'm able to feed my family and we're healthy and happy. There are a lot of ways that I'm very privileged. But that had nothing to do with the beginning of my journey to practicing minimalism. And so when people try to cross those two things over, because a lot of the minimalists that they see maybe have nice things and are able to afford really extravagant or really high quality items, or have sponsors for high quality items that you wouldn't necessarily be able to afford, it can be easy to just assume, well, minimalism is a lifestyle for the rich and privileged, or for people who are within a certain standard of living. And that's just not the case. That definitely has not been my experience. I think it's funny that you regret having such a bare baby registry. I guess minimalism didn't work that time. Okay, so when I had Chloe, who is now a year and a half, I did have a what's not on my baby registry, what is on my baby registry. And even at that time, I was pretty clear that, hey, I may change my mind about this, but what I'm not going to do is order a bunch of stuff that I might not need and find, just like have excess later, especially before the baby's even here and I even know exactly what we're going to get a lot of use out of. So, uh, people really like it when they feel like somebody who has a platform or somebody who is practicing a way of life that they don't practice seems to get something wrong. But honestly, I don't even feel like things like that are getting it wrong. I think that even if there are things that I end up not having and needing later, I would still have made that decision. I would still make the decision to err on the side of not having too much junk that's going to stress me out that I'm going to have to find a spot for versus maybe not registering for something that I might need later and then just taking that as it comes and not stressing about it. I still would have made the same decisions. And I don't see it as a failing of some sort on being a minimalist. You minimalists are trying to suck the joy out of everything. There's joy in stuff. I've gotten quite a few, like a surprising number of comments from people saying that there's no joy in not having stuff. Like, the stuff is what's fun, the stuff is what's happy and what's joyful. And it's kind of perplexing to me, I guess, because I've been living this lifestyle for a long time. I really have to put myself in my shoes from like 15 years ago when I was constantly bringing random stuff in as my form of entertainment, as my form of like pleasure. But I can say, like, because I went through that whole period of my life, that the joy never really did come from the stuff. Now, there's stuff that I have that I'm stoked about. I'm really excited that I have a robot vacuum that's going to vacuum my floors for me. I'm really happy that I have a super comfortable bed that I love sleeping in and waking up in the morning. But those also aren't the things that anybody is recommending that you declutter, right? Like the things that minimalists choose to live without are the things that they're not using, that are not adding real value to their daily lives, that are acting as just excess, frivolous things that are taking up space and making it stressful to try to maintain on a daily basis. There's a balance. Like everybody has their own balance of what is enough. And, for me, it's kind of like the whole art on the walls thing. Like for me, having some of those things is a part of my own personal balance. Here's one that came through somewhat recently. I have a miscellaneous drawer because I don't have the space to have a separate drawer for each individual item. I'm not one of the 1%. It irritates the hell out of me that so many YouTubers think we all live in freaking big mansions with huge kitchens. So again, this is kind of like the whole privilege thing, but I specifically wanted to mention this one because I definitely don't have a huge kitchen. If you've seen like my tour, my home tours, or even just like any video that shows my kitchen, it's a pretty small kitchen. We don't have a lot of cabinet space. We don't have a lot of drawer space. We try not to keep anything on the counter, so that means we even have less cabinet and drawer space than most people who probably do store things up on the counter. And also the drawers that I do have tend to have more than just one specific item in them. Like I understand limits on space and that you can't just have one drawer dedicated to pens and one drawer dedicated to forks. I don't even have one drawer just dedicated to silverware. I have other little things that belong in the kitchen that I kind of like find spots for around the silverware. But that's different from having a multitude of what we call, because the video that this was in response to was related to junk drawers. That's different than having a multitude of junk drawers or drawers that have a bunch of stuff crammed in them that you can't open or close. There are ways, even in really small and micro spaces, to still find space. There are always ways to find space, whether that is losing some of the excess or learning better ways of organizing your spots, or maybe things don't go in drawers. Maybe they're just like, there's so many different ways. Like I've got tons of videos out there, but I definitely don't think that you need to have a large storage solution area to be minimalist. If anything, minimalism is kind of like a way around that, right? Like minimalism means that you don't need to have so much storage spaces because you don't have quite so much stuff. So it's really a whole different problem. It's a different dilemma. Creative minds are rarely tidy. Life is easier when you stop caring what other people think of you. I've talked about this one before too, because I am a very creative person. I went to college with an art scholarship. I do oil paints, I've done acrylic paints, I've done charcoals, I've pastels. Like I've dabbled in all the stuff. I got into crocheting for a while, which is a whole different group of stuff and belongings that goes along with that. Obviously, I do video recording, audio recording. I've got materials and stuff that goes with that. And I still consider myself a minimalist. And I find that it's easier and more inspiring for me to practice my art when I have space to do so, when I am not being distracted by random things that need to be taken care of or put away, when I have my art supplies like neatly laid out before me to where I can see them. Like that is inspiring to me. That makes me want to pick something up and mess with it. Whereas like a big box of just dumped oil paints where I'm having to dig around and see what's empty and what's not empty, like that's not inspiring to me. Now I understand that everybody has their different artistic inspirations and, creative flows and everything, but I definitely do not think that minimalism is like the antithesis of creativity. And I wouldn't want anybody to have that impression, because that has been the opposite of my experience. There are many, many more. Maybe I'll do one of these in the future if anybody even enjoys hearing these alternative viewpoints. But that's all that I'm going to touch on today. I think that that's enough to kind of give people like a rebuttal, a different way of looking at things, a way that isn't just black or white or good or bad, but find your own way and still being able to create your own space. I think that that's really important, and that's what's so great about having a minimalist lifestyle, is that there are no rules and there is no one size fits all. Hopefully you found this helpful. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and I will chat with you next week.